Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing great. I am Punya Agarwal, ACCA affiliate and one of the admins of Being ACCA. And in this video, I will be explaining everything about substantive procedures for all my AA and AAA students. I know you people were asking for this video from a long time. It just got delayed. Now let's start with substantive procedures, how to write them, how can you approach them, and what are they? I know there are many students who are not even aware of what are substantive procedures. Firstly, they just, learn it from the answers and then they write into their, case scenario, which is not the correct way how we go about it. So first, let's understand what are substantive procedures so that we are able to better frame our answers as well, right? Okay. So substantive procedures are nothing but plan of action by auditor, right? So plan of action by the auditor to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence. So now there can be a scenario in the question where there was a risk, for example, right? So now I have to be more professionally skeptic that okay, this is the risk. Now I have to obtain little more evidence regarding the same. For example, in the question it was detection risk, right? Now in the detection risk itself says that you do not have sufficient appropriate evidence. So now the auditor will put in place some courses of action, some procedures to seek those sufficient appropriate evidence and to detect any material misstatement if that is in the question. So here we discuss about two things. Firstly is the sufficient appropriate evidence. Secondly is to detect risk of material misstatement, to see if we have any misstatements in the question or not, right? So these are substantive procedures which are very different from your audit response, which are very different from your control recommendations, test of controls, all of these things, right? So let's discuss further. Now there are two things which are there in your substantive procedures. How can you write them? First can be analytical procedures. So now there are many students also who are confused between, is there a difference between substantive procedure and analytical procedures? Yes, there is a difference between them. Substantive procedure is an umbrella. It is bigger picture, okay? And analytical procedures come under substantive procedures. They are part of your substantive procedure of how you are obtaining sufficient appropriate evidence or how you are calculating the risk of material misstatement, right? And then there can be testing, general testing, right? So analytical procedures are nothing but they compare your financial data like from the previous year to the current year. So this is a comparison, or I can also check out the trends in the ratios. So whenever in the question you're given set of ratios to calculate, in that question you can use those same ratios to also write your substantive procedures that are analytical procedures. So wherever figures come into place that are known as analytical procedures, which compare your financial data of previous year to the current year to check out any fluctuations if there were any, or there are the trends in the ratios that GP margin is itna or your operating profit margin is itna. So that is your analytical procedures. And then the testing, the test of details, if you say the test of transactions, the test of your procedures, your risks, all of these things, these are the individual transactions which can determine our accuracy, our completeness, all of the assertions that we usually test. Okay, so there are two things. Firstly, there's testing. Secondly, there is analytical procedures which we can use to make our substantive procedures. So I hope this is clear that analytical procedures and substantive procedures are two different things. Okay, now let's move forward. What are the types of substantive procedures, the procedures that you can use? So simple, there's a mnemonic AEIOU. I hope that you know this, plus R square. So I'll just briefly talk about this. Firstly is your analytical procedures, which we just discussed, right? Then is your inquiry. Inquiry if you have seen statements like inquire from management, inquire from finance director. So inquiry is basically acknowledging, asking the knowledgeable person, no, asking your management, asking your finance director about something that you're not sure of. You just want to confirm that, right? So that is inquiry. I is inspection. You are physically inspecting. For example, in the question they asked you about the substantive procedures for non-current asset, then you can write inspect the, go to the warehouse, inspect the assets physically to verify its existence. So this is your substantive procedure, right? Then is your O is observation. Again, in the question, if it is saying about the, that there is a warehouse and there is camera installed to check that there is no fraud happening, you can observe the processes of that. You can observe the other processes that the company is undertaking. So observation. Then U is just for, just to make this mnemonic. It doesn't stand anywhere out of it. Then we have R square, which is recalculate and review. Okay. Now, recalculate and review is again, recalculate is again about your, if there was any figures in the question, you can just recalculate it to ensure that the figures are correct, they're accurate. Review, again, review the supporting documentation, all of these things, right? Again, from E also, we can make it E square and we can have external confirmation. Okay, external confirmation is, asking the third parties. For example, if there was a legal claim against your company, you can ask your legal advisor to let you know if that, that claim is probable or possible, whatever. So you can ask the external party. External confirmation is another example. So you can memorize, because AEI are your, easy way to learn these. So you can use this mnemonic to learn your types of substantive procedures. Now, one thing which I always, before starting with how we actually write the answers and what is the correct approach and what is the major thing that students miss on while writing the substantive procedures is, firstly, I want to discuss, whenever you're writing any substantive procedure or substantive procedures or your audit risks or your internal controls, anything in audit, always keep three questions in your mind: what, how, and why. If you keep these three questions in mind and you write your procedures or audit risk or internal controls according to these three questions, and in your statement these three questions are getting answered, you are sorted with your substantive procedure. You do not have to worry about your substantive procedures or audit risk or the internal controls. So what are you doing, how are you going to do that, and why are you doing that? Simple. So please keep these three questions well in your mind, fitted in your mind. Do write these in your answer, right? So now let's discuss some of the mistakes that students usually do. And then we'll move forward with how to attempt. I'll show you an example from the question and then we'll form one substantive procedure. So first, let's talk about the mistakes that students do. First is repeating the same thing once or twice, the question requirement. For example, whenever we are writing our substantive procedures, we are writing 1, 2, 3, we can straight away start. I have seen students that they, form a short summary over here, that, substantive procedures in relation to this. You do not have to write that. That is given in the question itself. You can just, if you want, you can give like a heading. Like if it is about the revenue, you can give a heading as revenue, and you can continue with your substantive procedures, right? So you do not have to waste a lot of time writing unnecessary things which are not even required, right? First is that. Secondly, okay. Secondly, always, whenever, for example, if it is a 5 marker, right? My advice would be, like, of course, you have to write at least 5 points over here. But my advice would be that please write at least 6, like write 1 extra point. So that even if by mistake if, for example, one of your audit, the substantive procedures went wrong by mistake, at least you have a buffer with 6. Do not write 7, 8, 9. No, you do not have a lot of time on that. Just write 1 extra so that you are good to go with, you have a full-fledged answer. Even if one gets wrong, at least you have a buffer with you, right? So my advice would be that. Then very, very, very important mistake that students usually do, that they write all the generic substantive procedures and they do not relate it to the case scenario. Relating to the case scenario is very, very, very important. You have to write it according to the case study. See, simple logic is, if they're giving you such detailed case study and they're asking you the question for revenue, for example, why have they given you the case scenario if they want the generic, generic substantive procedures? They want you to use that case study and then write your substantive procedures. So my advice again here would be, for example, if it is like a 5 marker, okay, 5 marker, write at least 3 points from in relation to the case study, and rest two can be your generic ones, which can be your analytical procedures as well. So write at least three from the case study and write these at the top. Like start with the substantive procedures from the case study, and then the rest two can be your analytical procedures or your generic procedures, which can be at the bottom. Simple logic. Okay, so that is that. Another very common mistake that I've seen students doing is I'm sorry, writing, whenever we are writing substantive procedures, we answer the question why, as I discussed above. We answer the question why by using assertions, assertions like completeness, then accuracy, then disclosures, right? All of these assertions. So try and do not stick to only one assertions, and try and write at least 3 to 4 assertions in your answer, so that your answer is not just stick to one. Because sometimes another one very important thing that in the question, sometimes they say that write the substantive procedures in relation to revenue too, and they also give you the assertion to check the completeness and accuracy. So in this case, you do not have any option but to write about these. And many students actually skip on this and get their marks cut, because in here they have specifically mentioned that you have to write about completeness and accuracy, right? So that is very, very important. If it is not given in the question that you have to refer to the completeness and the accuracy, just revenue is given, go on to write multiple assertions, right? So this is what I wanted to discuss. These are very common mistakes that I usually find in the answer scripts that I check of my test series. So there, as I mentioned, that there are 3 questions: what, how, and why, right? We discussed 3 questions. Now let's see how to implement these into our substantive procedures. When we have to answer what, this will be the starting point of your answer. You will always be using a verb. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to review? Are you going to recalculate? Are you going to discuss maybe, right? Are you going to again, are you going to, like, what are you going to do basically, right? So these are the verbs that you can use to write your answer. Like, start your answer with anything, observe, so whatever. So what are you going to, are you going to review, are you going to recalculate, are you going to discuss, whatever. So first is done, which is a verb that we usually use. Then is the how are we going to review, how are we going to recalculate, how are we going to discuss. So how are we going to discuss is by using a supporting document. For example, as I discussed earlier, there's an example that you are going to inspect, physically verify the presence of the tangible assets at your warehouse. So how are you going to do it? Go to the warehouse and do it. So basically, physically verifying it is how you are going to do it. So these are the supporting documentation. Supporting documentation can also be your the board minutes. They can be your sales ledger, purchase ledger, all of the documents that you can use to check if the process is going fine and to obtain evidence out of it, right? Third is your why. Why is usually test your assertion, right? So why are you going to do so is to check the completeness, to check the accuracy, to check the disclosures, all of these things. So again, verb plus supporting document plus assertions will be your answer for the substantive procedure. So whenever you're writing any substantive procedures, always keep three things in mind, three questions in mind. Firstly, what are you going to do? Then just see if you have used the verbs. Secondly, how are you going to do? Just see if you're using any supporting documentations. And thirdly, why are you going to use it? Just see any assertions. Have you written any assertions or no? If you're done with these three things, you are good to go for the substantive procedures, right? Now, let's discuss some of the commonly asked substantive procedures. I know this, like the list is extensive, but commonly asked can be your revenue, can be your non-current assets, can be your current assets, can be your bank loan, right? Can be your purchases, can be your payables, can be your receivables, can be your provisions. All of these are very generic ones. These are all very common ones which usually appear in your answer. So now let's see. See, I know that you people would be aware of how to write the generic ones, but I'm here to explain you how to write a specific audit, specific substantive procedure, right? So let's see. I have an example open for you people here. Okay, so this is a question from one of my tests. Like it is a past paper question only. This is question Darjeeling Company, right? And here, if you see, they're asking you describe, just a minute. Yeah, describe substantive procedures for the auditor to should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence in relation to Darjeeling Company's revenue. So here they're talking about revenue. They have not stated any assertion that they have just written revenue. So you can use any assertions that you feel like using, right? Now, let's see. As I said, that you first have to, it is a 5 marker. That means at least 3 points will be from my case study, and 2 points can be the generic ones, which I can use generally also, right? So let's see. Let's read the case study. I will give you one example of how to relate it to the case scenario. Okay, let's read this paragraph once. In addition, the Darjeeling Company made an announcement in October 2004 of its price promise. So price promise is related to your revenue, that it would match the prices of any competitor for similar products purchased. So this is basically your IFRS 15, right? Customers who are able to prove that they could purchase the products cheaper elsewhere are asked to claim the difference from the Darjeeling Company within 1 month of the date of the purchase of goods via its website. The company intends to include a refund liability, which is based on the monthly level of claims to date. And so, see, here I'm able to get two substantive procedures from the case study, right? Two substantive procedures. One would be my price promise. So let's draft this in our here. First is related to price promise. Okay, you do not have to write this. I'm just writing it down for you people to understand. Okay, now you can write. Firstly, again, three questions: what, how, and why. Right. So you can discuss maybe with finance director, right? What is done, how are you going to discuss? You can discuss with finance director the refund liability, about the refund liability of 0.25 million. Discuss with finance director the refund liability and how it was recognized, to confirm or to confirm, just a minute. Yeah, to assess its reasonableness. Sorry. Yeah. So in the question, it was given about your refund liability. I'm not talking about price promise right now. Let's discuss first about the refund liability. So I'll be discussing with the finance director that, so now my one assertion is clear what I'm going to do. I'm going to discuss with the finance director the refund liability of this. So how I'm going to do so, how I'm going to discuss it through discussion about the refund liability of this and how it was recognized in the recognized in the financial statement. You can also add in financial statements, right? Now, how is done and why? Why I am going to discuss is to assess the reasonableness of the refund liability, right? So this is in relation to your case study again, right? So this is in relation to your case study again. You can write about the price promise as well. Similarly, you can write about the price promise also. Price promise को कैसे लिखोगे? For sales made under price promise, you can compare the level of claims or the refunds made under refund liability to check if all claims are settled. Basic, simple. You don't have to go very hi-fi with your language as well. So these are two examples which I gave for your relation to the case scenario. Now one more example which can be direct. So let's discuss one of the mistakes that people usually do. The well described substantive procedure and what can be a not well described. So let's see. I hope you understood with the example how to relate it to the case scenario. Read the case scenario and then write your answer according to that, answering these three questions, right? Now, let's see well described substantive procedures and not described well. Okay, let's see. I'll take one example. I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's take an example of maybe bank loan. Okay, bank loan is an example. Now, first let's see what will be our not well described substantive procedure, right? So, for example, you will write for all bank accounts, for all the bank accounts that you have, obtain account reconciliation and check them. Simple. You have just written this. You are done. Now here, ask yourself, if you are writing like this, ask yourself these three questions again. What, how, and why? What is done? I can see obtain. Obtain is there. I can, okay, this is fine. How? All reconciliations and check them. Okay, I got to know that how are we going to do so? Have you answered why? Why are we reconciling and checking them? Why is a missing thing here? So it is a not well described substantive procedure. Now, on the other hand, same thing. I'll write same thing for all bank accounts. Or you can also write it as obtain a bank account reconciliation for all bank accounts, and casting can be done, checking can be done. So we'll use checking only. You can write casting as well. Casting to, now to is your why over here. To ensure arithmetical accuracy, or because we are casting, if we are using casting word, casting means totaling. Okay, if we are doing that arithmetical accuracy, if we are just checking, or if you're just checking it, we can also use completeness or accuracy as the assertion. So I am just telling you, whenever you're writing any of the substantive procedure, it is important for you to base your substantive procedure on something, right? These three questions are very, very, very important. Common mistakes that students usually do, I have tried and explained in this video how to approach them and write them in a better scenario. One thing extra you can do whenever you're writing generic substantive procedures. Okay, generic substantive procedures. For example, you wrote that, just a minute. Okay, how can we link our generic substantive procedures to our case study? Okay, now as I mentioned that there, if five are the total, three should be directly from the case study and two can be the generic ones. Now these two also we can somewhat relate to our case study. How? Let's see. Okay, firstly, we can use the company's name. Okay, whenever, for example, obtain written representation, for example, from Darjeeling company management. Okay, so here when I'm writing this thing, it means I'm relating it to the case scenario. Okay, I'm relating it to the case scenario. I'm sorry. Right? So if I'm writing, firstly using the name, whenever you are writing any procedure, just keep this again in your mind that you have to use the name of the company also in your answer. So Darjeeling company I have used. Second thing is there are figures given into your question. There are figures or numericals given into your answer question. For example, if it is was about bank loan, so they will give you that this company obtained a bank loan of $10 million, right? So in that case, you can use this figure also in your substantive procedure, right? So this is how you can link your generic substantive procedures also to the case study by using firstly the name of the question, the name of the company. Secondly, by using the figures from the same question, right? So it just, you can use these two together as well. You can use one of them as well. It's just upon you. So I hope that this video was helpful for you, and I hope that I solved majority of the doubts that you people had for substantive procedure. If you have any doubts further, you can definitely comment down below and or let me know via DM, and I'll be happy to help you.